welcome to this event. For those of you who don't know the Interfaith Encounter Association, I will say in one sentence that we work to build intercommunal relations between Jews and Muslims and Christians and Druze in the Holy Land. Nearly all the activities are done within the framework of ongoing groups that meet typically once a month over some of them many years. We do very few one-time events, and when Baruch called me 2 weeks ago and said, let's do something for Martin Luther King Day, I thought this is something that is worthy of doing. Because many aspects of our work are kind of related to Martin Luther King's legacy. One aspect that I wanted to stress is the fact that he was a man of vision. He was not only fighting this or that wrong, but having a vision of harmony, of transformation of the heart, of harmonious relations between, as he says, descendants of slaves and descendants of slaves, owners who are friends. And we too in the Interfaith Encounter Association have this vision of having the Holy Land as a place of peace and friendship and mutual care, and we have this dream that all the people of the Holy Land will live with each other in harmony and in good neighborhood, and we have this dream that the love that we all share for the country will be something that unites us rather than something that separates us, and that everyone will understand that we are brothers and sisters. And even the way towards that, there's a nice quote from Martin Luther King that we put in our coordinator's manual 2 years ago when we started it. And I believe he says that we need to do what we are doing, and I'm reading. I'm convinced that men hate each other because they fear each other. And they fear each other because they don't know each other. And they don't know each other because they don't communicate with each other. And they don't communicate with each other because they are separated from each other. And God grant that something will happen to open channels of communication, because men of goodwill will rise to the level of leadership, and I think this is what we are trying to do. And everyone, of course, is welcome to join. If you are not on our list of yes, please Google us and send an email, and you will be.
Start by thanking the organizers of today. I also am humbled by being in the presence of two ambassadors, former Ambassador Elon Liel from Israel and also Ambassador Shakya from the Embassy of Nepal. I am not the American ambassador, but I do run the American Center over on Karen Hayesod. And among the reasons why I'm so pleased to be here is that I would be less than truthful if I didn't acknowledge this is a difficult period for my own country, the United States of America. And so giving me the opportunity to draft some remarks, which I'll present shortly, gave me the opportunity to think about some of the proudest things that make me feel good about being an American. So again, thank you for giving me this honor and this privilege. When I worked as a press officer with now retired Ambassador Ted Osius in Vietnam from 2014 to 2016, he often cited the famous quote, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." When we worked there, he focused the most compelling civil and human rights efforts on the American values of freedom of speech, religion, press, assembly, and in particular, LGBTQ rights. Of course, Vietnam, a nation of over 90 million people, is governed by 4,000 members of the Communist Party. The country has more than its fair share of challenges, but also many people who are ready, willing, and able to meet and overcome them. As it turns out, when Dr. King articulated this phrase in the 1964 commencement address, he was actually paraphrasing a portion of an 1853 sermon by Theodore Parker. Reverend Parker was born in Lexington, Massachusetts in 1810, studied at Harvard Divinity School, and eventually became an influential transcendentalist and minister in the Unitarian Church, as well as an influential abolitionist. In that sermon, Minister Parker said, "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure it bends toward justice." Let's take a moment to learn a bit more about this person who inspired not only Dr. King, but also Rabbi Jacob Cohn, former Attorney General Eric Holder, former President Barack Obama, and I will suggest us. Minister Parker saw slavery as the greatest obstacle to achieving industrial democracy. He denounced the passage of the horrific Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which established a federal bureaucracy to catch slaves who had escaped to free states. While some Unitarian ministers claimed the act was sanctioned by Scripture, Parker called it what it was, a violation of Christian ideals and a threat to free institutions. In his sermons, he enjoined his congregants to defy it. Reverend Parker served as the abolitionists' minister-at-large to fugitive slaves in Boston. He chaired the executive committee of the Vigilance Committee, the principal Boston organization providing fugitives with material aid, legal assistance, and help in eluding capture. In 1850, when Ellen Craft, a fugitive in his congregation, was threatened with arrest, he hid her in his house until arrangements could be made to send her to Canada. In 1854, his agitation on behalf of fugitive Anthony Burns led to Parker's indictment by a federal grand jury. He was charged with obstructing a federal marshal. Parker wielded so much public support, however, that prosecuting him became politically impossible. In 1855, the case was dismissed on a technicality. He died before he could see his country nearly ripped apart by a bloody civil war that would decide issues of the economy, slavery, and states' rights. Before we leave Minister Parker's world to fast forward to that of Dr. King's, I want us to take a moment to reflect upon what that late 19th century looked like. When Reverend Parker delivered those rallying lines, the promises that all men are created equal, presented in the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, were nowhere close to being fulfilled, a staggering 77 years after they were written. And let's remember that it was only men who were created equal. We'll get around to the women in a bit. So who were these men? Well, they were white, landed, and educated. In Minister Parker's United States of 1853, of the 23 million Americans counted in the 1850 census, the all men are created equal line excluded over 3 million slaves, presumably both men and women. It's easy to say that in 1853, there remained much work to be done. So let's move a bit closer to our contemporary period and examine the 20th century. In a 1940 Rosh Hashanah message, Rabbi Jacob Cohn of Temple Sinai in Los Angeles co-opted Minister Parker's thoughts as follows. Our faith is kept alive by the knowledge founded on long experience that the arc of history is long and bends toward justice. In Rabbi Cohn's version, we begin to hear the compelling call from Dr. King. In 1958, Dr. King penned a journal article with the saying, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." But then, in that 1964 commencement speech at Connecticut's Wesleyan University, he uttered it with his thunderous voice and breathed life into the words he'd written on journal pages. Nearly 60 years later, former Attorney General Eric Holder cautioned that the arc bends toward justice, but it only bends toward justice because people pull it towards justice. It doesn't happen on its own. In his view, human agency compels the process. President Obama so loved the sentence that he had it literally woven into a rug in the Oval Office. So, from where does this over 150-year history and longevity of this quote derive? It derives from the same place that, for instance, Social Workers for Peace get their commitment to tackle social ills and injustices here in Israel. It derives from the same place that Mosaica finds its vision for the Religious Peace Initiative, in which religious leaders address the challenge of peace and fulfill the words of Torah rather than violating them. It derives from the same place that the Interfaith Encounter Association identifies its motivation to build bridges among Jews, Muslims, Christians, and others based on tradition and culture without any political agenda. I suggest it comes from a place where Ambassador Shakya and those of us who serve our countries as diplomats pull our determination to make the world a more peaceful and just place. It derives from the same place to which Virginia State Senator Mamie Locke referred just last week when she said, "There's no time limit on equal rights." She was referring to the vote that made Virginia the 38th state and therefore the last state needed to pass the Equal Rights Amendment over 40 years after some thought the initiative was permanently defeated. It derives from the same place that Brian Stevenson of the Equal Justice Initiative references in his book Just Mercy and in the recently released movie of the same name, in which he indicts the American criminal justice system for its role in codifying modern systemic racism and tracks the intertwined histories of slavery, lynching, segregation, and mass incarceration that continues to trap too many Americans in places where they are unable to fulfill their claim to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So where is that place? That place is, in my opinion, a place of indignation and hope. Indignation, according to its dictionary definition, is the strong displeasure at something considered unjust, offensive, insulting, or base, righteous anger. Without indignation, the system beats us down. We get discouraged. We feel trapped by our inability to effect positive change. Hope is defined as the feeling that what is wanted can be had, or that events will turn out for the best. Hope is the idea that we can be active participants in our lives and in our futures. Hope is the idea that we can shape our destiny. Hope is the idea that we, individually and collectively, can make a positive difference, even if that difference is small and confined to the margins of history. While I was a child when Dr. King was murdered in 1968, and so obviously never had the privilege of hearing him live or meeting him, I believe he possessed these two qualities. When Dr. King led the Montgomery bus boycott on the same day that Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on a bus to a white person, when Dr. King served as the first president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which he founded to support nonviolent protests for equality, when, after the Birmingham, Alabama boycott of local businesses failed to force the city to desegregate, and he led protests to end discriminatory Jim Crow laws that lingered from the post-Civil War period. When Reverend King led and stood before over 200,000 people in 1963 at Washington, D.C.'s Mall, in the footsteps of President Abraham Lincoln, where he and other civil rights, labor, and religious leaders called for civic and economic equality for African Americans. There he delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech, all of which contributed to the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act that outlawed discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. And when the world recognized Dr. King's tremendous achievements by honoring him in 1964 with the Nobel Peace Prize for his commitment to nonviolence as the means to achieve peace and equality, Dr. King must have been motivated by indignation and inspired by hope. For me, I must admit that I waver between fascination and frustration that nearly 244 years after the founding fathers of the United States laid the challenging underpinnings for a more perfect union, in the words of the American Constitution, we still struggle with injustice. As a country, and I would suggest as a planet, we have yet to make ourselves whole and to reach the promise that all are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I may be humbled and somewhat disheartened that we have yet to get it right. Like it or not, that is our struggle in 2020. It is a valiant and important one. As we remember the efforts and contributions of the person we honor here today, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I urge each of us to commit to creating positive change in our little corner of the world. I urge each of us to work to change the footnotes of history. My own religious tradition teaches in MLK Avot, the ethics of our fathers, that you are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. So today, to honor not only Dr. King, but those who came before and after him, let us dedicate ourselves to pursuing the promise of that moral universe. Let us commit to finally, and after all too long, achieving peace. Thank you. And if anyone has any questions, if I have any time left, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. greetings. We have to do Namaste, Shalom, Johara and Tabin. I am very much happy to be here. Anis Mikhabiod, Excellencies, Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank organizer for inviting me to speak a few words about this, his contribution of Martin Luther King. So I'm here, and I was told that to speak 10 to 15 minutes. I hope that I'll be in time, and I'm a little bit also worried. I have meeting in Ministry of Foreign Affairs after this. And it was very wonderful performance that he played. Is very outstanding. Majal tov. A very good afternoon to all of you. At the outset, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to the organizers for inviting me to speak few words at this commemoration event of Martin Luther King. I would like to briefly recall his biography. As we all know, Martin Luther King was a scholar who led the civil rights movement chiefly in the United States of America and beyond. He is remembered for his successful initiatives in the civil rights movement of the world. It is said that he got his name after his father adopted the name Martin in honor of the German Protestant religious leader Martin Luther. Although his family was deeply involved in the church and worship, King used to raise questions on religion and feel uncomfortable with overly emotional displays of religious worship. He frequently rebelled against his father's more conservative thinking and behavior. Martin Luther King completed his PhD at the age of 25, which is incredible, sufficient to say that he was genius. His philosophy and ways to see the society, politics, religion, etc. is more relevant in the contemporary world. In his time, the students would sit at racially segregated lunch counters in the city's stores. If they sit in places other than the colored section, they would have to face inhuman behaviors, subjecting themselves to verbal and sometimes physical abuse. So, King and his followers started confronting such traditions. King was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi's success with non-violent activism and visited India. King described Gandhi as being one of the individuals who greatly revealed the working of the Spirit of God. The trip affected him in a profound way, increasing his commitment to America's civil rights struggle. Non-violent action is the practice of achieving a social change through symbolic protest, civil disobedience, economic or political non-cooperation, satyagraha, and other methods. I think personally that these are still relevant in our society and of course our world leaders to practice in our daily life to stand peace, justice, and humanity. King's encouragement to use non-violent methods during the protest was really an exemplary act. In his first speech as the group's president, King declared, "We have no alternative but to protest. For many years, we have shown an amazing patience. We have sometimes given our white brothers the feeling that we liked the way we were being treated. But we come here tonight to be saved from such passions that makes us passionate with anything less than freedom and justice." King became able in putting new energy into the civil rights struggle that involved action against exploitation in work, harassment, violence, and intimidation for African American community. King and their friends struggled to give African Americans a voice and to enfranchise them in the voting process. In 1958, King met with religious and civil rights leaders and lectured all over the country on race-related issues. During the course, King was jailed along with large numbers of his supporters, but his endeavor drew nationwide attention. Also, King was personally criticized by black and white clergy for endangering the children who attended various demonstrations. In his famous letter from Birmingham jail, King eloquently spelled out his theory of nonviolence. Nonviolent direct action seeks to create such a crisis and foster such a tension that the community, which has constantly refused to negotiate, is forced to confront the issue. By the end of the Birmingham campaign, King and his supporters were making plans for a massive demonstration on the nation's capital composed of multiple organizations, all asking for peaceful change. I would like to mention here that Nepal always aimed at contributing to global peace, harmony, respect, justice, freedom, and non-violence. So I can put forward my views that we can change the world peacefully. We agreed upon it also. In 1963, the historic March on Washington drew more than 200,000 people in the shadow of the Lincoln Memorial. It was here that King made his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, emphasizing his belief that someday all men could be brothers. I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. The rising tide of civil rights agitation produced a strong effect on public opinion. Many people in cities not experiencing racial tension began to question the nation's laws and second-class treatment of African American citizens. This resulted in the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, authorizing the federal government to enforce desegregation of public accommodations and outlawing discrimination in publicly owned facilities. Consequently, King was awarded by the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. King is the youngest, 35 years old, African American ever to receive the Nobel Prize. King's struggle continued throughout the 1960s, as she mentioned earlier from American Miss Lija. In 1965, civil rights march turned violent. Marchers confronted barricades and state troopers that created a bloody and horrifying situation. A number of marchers were severely injured. Instead of forcing a confrontation, King led his followers to turn back. A second, third, and higher stages of marches continued. 5 months after the historic peaceful protest, President Johnson signed the 1965 Voting Rights Act. From the late 1965 through 1967, King expanded his civil rights efforts into other larger American cities, including Chicago and Los Angeles. But he met with increasing criticism and public challenges from young black power leaders. King's passion, nonviolent approach, and appeal to white middle-class citizens alienated many black militants who considered his methods too weak, too late, and ineffective. To address this criticism, King began making a link between discrimination and poverty, and he began to speak out against the Vietnam War. He felt that America's involvement in Vietnam was politically untenable and the government's conduct in the war discriminatory to the poor. By 1968, King had grown tired of marches, going to jail, and living under the constant threat of death. He was becoming discouraged at the slow progress of civil rights in America and the increasing criticism from other African American leaders. On April 3, 1968, King gave his final and prophetic speech, "I have been to mountaintop," in which he told supporters, "I have seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. The next day, while standing on the balcony outside his room, at the Lorraine Motel, Martin Luther King was killed by a sniper's bullet. King's life had a seismic impact on race relations in the United States of America. Years after his death, he is the most widely known African American leader of his era. His life and work have been honored with a national holiday, schools and public buildings named after him, and a memorial on Independence Mall in Washington, D.C. Over the years, extensive archival studies assessed him as a visionary leader who was deeply committed to achieving social justice through nonviolent means. In 1983, President Ronald Reagan signed into law a bill creating Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a federal holiday honoring the legacy of civil rights leader. Martin Luther King Jr. Day was first celebrated in 1986 and in all 50 states in 2000. King is remembered as a martyr by the Episcopal Church in the United States of America with an annual feast day on the anniversary of his death in April 4. Some in America commemorate King on the anniversary of his birth in January 15. Northumbria and Newcastle Universities of the United Kingdom are the centers for the study of Martin Luther King and the U.S. Civil Rights Movement. World peace through nonviolent means is neither absurd nor unattainable. All other methods have failed. Thus, we must begin anew. Nonviolence is a good starting point. Those of us who believe in this method can be voices of reason, sanity, and understanding amid the voices of violence, hatred, and emotion. Veteran African American civil rights activist Bayard Rustin was King's first regular advisor on nonviolence. King was also advised by the white activists Harris Wofford and Glenn Smiley. Wofford and Rustin both studied Gandhi's teachings. Rustin has applied nonviolence with the Journey of Reconciliation campaign in the 1940s, and Wofford had been promoting Gandhi's principle. King had initially known little about Gandhi and rarely used the term nonviolence during his early years of activism in the early 1950s. He continued fighting for civil rights and against poverty until an assassin's bullet ended his life. So this is a big lesson for the generations to generations that if we get this beautiful life, let's put our hands together to uplift and change our society in a good manner. We have got this special life as human beings. So we have to utilize it in best way with positive efforts to upgrade or uplift or change the society in a positive way. From the above story, it is proof that one human can change the world in a beautiful way. This is what I learned from his theory, his contributions, his ideas. So, America also respect his contributions. So many people now throughout the world, we listen to him and we are utilizing his practice in our daily lives. And at last, but not the least, as we are celebrating, Nepal is celebrating this 2020 as a Visit Nepal campaign. So I would like to urge you once again to welcome you all to Nepal. And we are having a lot of programs during this year especially. And not only our Visit Nepal 2020 campaign, but we are celebrating 60th years of anniversary diplomatic relations between Nepal and Israel. So we are having a lot of programs this year. So this year is very important, very significant for us. And Nepal, if you would like to come, you are most welcome. You can see the beautiful landscape, terraces, heritage sites, national park. You can see 100 rhino with elephants, and you can enjoy with cable cars even. Who don't like to trek, hike and climb the mountain, you are most welcome to Nepal and just sit in the cable cars and enjoy the mountaineering view. Thank you very much once again. Toda Rabba, Dhanyavad.
Having me. Yehuda asked me to speak a little bit about Jewish perspectives on nonviolence and civil rights. And as I was listening to the lectures, I'm going to add a little part to my PowerPoint, Yehuda. I want to talk also about from an Islamic perspective. And talk about some of the particular leader that I see as the Martin Luther King of the Islamic world that I want to talk about at the end. A rabbinic Jewish perspective. I wear a few different kippot. Okay, I'm a rabbi. I'm an academic where I teach on religion and peace building, and I direct Mosaic, the Religious Peace Initiative. And I just completed the book where which was just accepted by Oxford. Thank you. So I'm going to bring a little section from that connects it to Martin Luther King. So we're just going to. So I want to talk about nonviolent protests, which is I think a lot of what we think about with Martin Luther King, for equality and justice. And I want to talk about King and Yehuda ben Shammua, Rabbi Yehuda ben Shammua. Everyone knows about him, right? No. Okay. That's gone. Can you click? Famous quotes when we think about him demonstrating, right? We've learned to fly the air as birds. We've learned to swim the seas as fish. Yet we haven't learned to walk the earth as brothers and sisters. Anyone ever hear that quote? Very famous. Okay, another one. We must learn to live together as brothers or we will perish together as fools. Heard of that one?
Yeah.
Okay, try another one. Alas, in heaven's name, are we not your brothers? Are we not the sons of of one father? Are we not the sons of one mother? Why are we different from every nation and tongue that you issue such decrees upon us? Ever heard of that one?
No.
That's not King.
No.
That's the Talmud. Okay, click on to the next one.
That's why it's so familiar.
He knew Talmud. That's Yehuda ben Shammua. I want to introduce you to. I want to introduce you to a particular story of nonviolent protests for equality and justice that can be found. Actually, it's even earlier than the Talmud. Talmud is a classic rabbinic text, but the earliest rabbinic book called Megillat Ta'anit that goes back 100 years before the year 0 records the following story of a day of celebration. Okay, and this is the story that it tells. And it's the Talmud quotes the earlier story, so I'm bringing it from the Talmud, Babylonian Talmud Ta'anit. On the 20th day of Adar came glad tidings to the Jews that they should not abandon the practice of the law. That's the original statement. Now there's a story that came 100 years later that tells what happened on the 28th day that they didn't have to abandon their law. For the government of Rome had issued a decree that they should not study the Torah, and that they should not circumcise their sons, and that they should not profane the Sabbath. They should profane the Sabbath. There we go. I knew that didn't sound right. Okay. What did Yehuda ben Shammua and his colleagues do? Now let's pause here. Don't read what happens. Okay. What happens when they start decreeing on a minority group to not keep their culture, their identity? We celebrated a holiday not long ago in this country and all over the Jewish world of when decrees were made by the Greeks. What happened?
They rebelled.
They rebelled.
Yeah.
Not nonviolence, violence. There was a massive civil war. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed. Or, what's the other option?
Just to submit.
You comply. Nonviolence is the third option. Okay? What did Yehuda ben Shammua and his colleagues do? They went and consulted a certain noblewoman, a matronit, okay, whom all the Roman notables used to visit. Meaning this is somebody who was probably the widow of one of the governors of Rome who lived in the land of Israel at the time. A very well-respected person who Yehuda ben Shammua has direct friendship with. But she also understands the Romans. She said to them, go and demonstrate. Literally cry out at night. It's hafginu balayla. The word in Hebrew today for demonstration is the word hafgana, a demonstration. This is the first time it's ever mentioned in Hebrew. Okay, is in this text. It says, go out and demonstrate at night. And the famous medieval commentary on the Talmud, Rashi, explains, what does it mean to demonstrate? It means scream out in the marketplace and in the streets in order that the Roman ministers should hear and have compassion upon you. Speak to their hearts. What are you going to say to them? So they went out and demonstrated at night, and this is what they said. Alas, in heaven's name, are we not your brothers? Are we not the sons of one father? Are we not the sons of one mother? Why are we different from every nation and tongue that you issue such decrees upon us? And they did not move, some versions say, they did not move from there until the decrees were thereupon annulled. Meaning they did a sit-in, right, in the marketplace, screaming, why are you discriminating against us? We're all brothers. And that day was declared a feast day. It was a celebration. We unfortunately don't celebrate the 28th of Adar anymore. I would love, people who know me know that we've invented previous, no, that's 9. Yeah, we've invented other holidays. 28th of Adar should be the day of nonviolence. Now there's a lot of important ramifications of this story. Okay? If you click onward, okay? First is, one more, keep on going. It's going to get there. What were the alternatives? As we already mentioned. An alternative could have been, you comply. You're in my weak minority group, put your head down. Other, let's rebel. And that's, they won, the Israelites, the Jews won Hanukkah, they lost another 2. Okay, and they stopped for 2,000 years. But this was another option, right? That's Matityahu in the story of Hanukkah saying, Mi Lashem Elai, come and join me, let's violently protest. The story of Hanukkah, of the Jews versus the Greeks, there was no other option, it seemed. Keep on going. But there are other issues that come out of this, which is, first of all, what is the goal? How did the nonviolent demonstration actually succeed? Did they get the press involved? Did they get the international community to pressure the Romans? What did they do? So click on. Gene Sharp, famous author who wrote about the theory of nonviolence, he writes very simply, the end of his 3rd volume of 3 different ways demonstrations or nonviolence can actually make a difference. Okay? One is conversion, the other is accommodation, the third is nonviolent coercion. To what extent is my demonstration on nonviolence actually affecting change? But the question is, has the oppressor actually gone through a change of heart? A transformative moment? Or has it only been, they're just out of power in one way or the other? Not out of military force, but some other pressure upon them. Which one did Yehuda ben Shammua do?
The first one.
He did the first one 100%. He succeeded in getting the Romans, he worked within their language. Why were they doing decrees against the Jews to not keep the Sabbath, circumcise their children, or learn Torah? What were they trying to do? Probably. They're trying to forcefully secularize them. They're trying to forcefully make them be like Romans. Stop being different. But they, in my opinion, the way I'm reading the story, he actually worked within their own logic. By you forcing us to be similar, you're treating us differently. If you want to really treat us equally, let us have our identity. And he's able to work within their own logic, in my opinion, to be able to affect that type of change. I see something somewhat similar to the way King was able to influence. Right? I think he didn't just force people. He actually spoke to their hearts and was able to change from within. Keep on going. Okay. One more. I want to talk about the question of what can we learn from this story regarding nonviolent protests for advancing equality and justice from a Jewish perspective. One more. Another one. Okay. I first heard of this story when I came across this book. A book from the 18th century in Vilna called Shalom Achim, Peace Between Brothers. Rabbi Moses Rosenson writes a couple 100-page book in the 18th century Vilna, redefining halakha, Jewish law, to make Jews and non-Jews be totally equal under Jewish law. He's radically changing, saying there's an enlightenment as an Orthodox rabbi. He's starting to go through all the different laws and say, wait a minute, we have to start treating non-Jews differently than the way we've been perceiving them. And his opening page of the book, he brings the story here that I just read to you, and then he says the following sentence. It is an obligation from the Torah and the books of the Talmud and the rabbis to love all people as brothers and friends, without distinction with regard to which nation or religion they belong to. Meaning, in essence, what he's done is he took the sentence from the Talmud of a Jewish minority group, asking to be treated as equals in the name of we're all brothers, and said if we want to be treated as equals, we have to treat others as equals. He's flipping it onto his own obligation towards the other. And go on one more. He quotes a more famous book called Sefer Brit HaShalem. I would love for this to be in the educational system of Israeli school kids. Sefer Brit HaShalem means the covenant, the full covenant, which is the full covenant of humanity. This book came out 100 years before Rosenson, where he redefines the law, the verse of love your neighbor as yourself, which had been read to be particularistic. Only neighbors that are like yourself. And he reopens it, saying the essence of loving one's neighbor is for a person to love all humanity regardless of what nation they are from. A language simply because they are, a human being created in God's image and likeness to you. And he goes on and says, rather, the intention of neighbor is to any human being like yourself who is engaged in matters of the world like you, meaning every nation. Right? These are very universalistic concepts that were also inspired by this Talmudic story. And there's a constant tension if you click on, too, when they do a Google search of love your neighbor as yourself within school curriculums. You'll see a tension. You'll see a tension. On the one hand, you'll see this, which is two boys, wonderful, both wearing kippah, both wearing, meaning that they're religious, that those two Orthodox boys should like each other. That's very important. The question is, can you expand it? The first thing that came up, okay? I just did a Google image, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, right? Is there any pictures of Jew, non-Jew, racial, religious, all nations? This is the ambiguity of religion, okay? But these stories need to be taught and can be inspirational. One more. I want to say one sentence about why did this story go in the direction that it did towards nonviolence as opposed to ending up in a civil war like the story of Hanukkah. And I think that part of it had to do with the role of the Roman noblewoman, that there was what we call a third party, somebody who's connected to both parts. Now, I don't know enough about who was the third parties who were with Heschel, who were with King. But who were the people, was there somebody who was able to connect to say, listen, this is how you're going to make your message more impactful? But in this story, do one more as well. I'm not going to read this, but I'll just note that it's interesting that he might have been asking the woman to actually be an intermediary, to be a mediator, to go and represent because she was connected to both sides. I brought for here a quote which is strangely similar of how in certain African contexts, the older woman who's not perceived to be a threat, she can play, because of her kind of standing of influence but not power, she can actually be more effective in coming out and saying, we're your mothers, we do not want war, we do not want bloodshed, do not fight with your brothers, they have sent us to sue for peace, meaning a very non-violent approach towards this, which I think is part of the wisdom that maybe they were asking the woman to say, please represent us. She said, I'm not going to represent you. I'm going to teach you how to do a nonviolent demonstration, that you'll be able to speak to the hearts from within the culture and religion and identity of the Romans. And go on one more, that speaks to, I think, what I understand is, this was just where it is in my book. You can go through this very fast. Sorry, I borrowed that from something else. I wrote about the concept of third-party peacemakers, which I just want to emphasize. You can keep on going. It's in that chapter over there. I just want to emphasize, conflicts that don't have a third party that's connecting different parts get crazy violent. Conflicts that have third parties, keep on going please. I'm sorry. Keep on going. Okay. People that have third parties that are connecting different parts of the conflict have a higher chance of going nonviolent. I think the work that Yehuda is doing and the IEA, this is a picture of the opposite of what we're doing right now, and you talking to my students, okay, plays an important role of building webs of relationship, of creating a culture of third parties that can help then conflicts go nonviolent. I want to just say two sentences, I don't know how much time I have left, 2 minutes about who I believe needs to be known as the Martin Luther King of the Palestinian Islamic world. And it's not Yasser Arafat. It's Sheikh Abdallah Nimr Darwish. It's definitely not him. I'm talking about Sheikh Abdallah Nimr. How many of you know Sheikh Abdallah Nimr Darwish? It's not the same thing. But I want to say 2 sentences about Sheikh Abdallah. I direct the Religious Peace Initiative. One of the founders of that was Rabbi Michael Malkior. The other was his partner, Sheikh Abdallah Nimr Darwish. Sheikh Abdallah Nimr Darwish, who passed away 2 years ago, needs to be known like Martin Luther King is known. Every single 5th grader in the Palestinian and the Muslim world needs to grow up on his stories. Why? Because I see him as somebody who went through a full transformation. He led the religious return of Muslims back to Islam in the 60s and 70s, then started the jihad movement. He was the founder of the Islamic Jihad. The late 70s, with the Iranian Revolution, he gets 400 armed jihadists, then gets caught, goes to jail, starts leading his rallies in jail, starts understanding the other side, comes out and says, I'm no longer going to lead a violent jihad. From now on, we're going to go run in municipal elections, and then later in the Knesset. And they said, you're a traitor. You have to do a violent resistance. What are you doing? And he said, no, I'm going to fight for equal rights, and I'm going to work in a different direction. The last 20 years of his life, he worked with Rabbi Malkior in promoting religious peace around the entire Muslim world. When he passed away 2 years ago, you had the head of Hamas, Khalid Mashal call, Ismail Haniyeh call, in from Gaza. You had Abu Mazen. You also had Rabbi Malkior, Rabbi Avi Gisser, the head of the religious Zionist school system. He was in touch with both religious Zionist leaders and at the same time in touch with Yasser Arafat and the Islamic world. And he unabashedly said nonviolence, and we are, from within a deep Islamic perspective, promoting peace. That story is not well known. We are working on an academic book to document and tell over the story with my partners at Bar-Ilan University's Islamic Studies Department, so that in 3 years we'll have that book, 5 years we'll have the movie. And then in 7 years we're going to have the curriculum. I'm being serious. Because we need to have heroes like King, who inspire people, who are indigenous to that language, who have stripes that can say, I went to jail and I came out and I believe in nonviolence. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I heard about this meeting only 2 days ago, and I told Baruch I want to come and participate, and he invited me. I don't have a speech, but I have a story to tell him, which in a way is also my dream. In early 1990, exactly 30 years ago, I was appointed Israel's Consul General to Atlanta. The reason, by the way, was CNN, because I was the spokesman of the ministry, and they thought they need somebody with media experience. They sent me to Atlanta. But in Atlanta, I discovered, of course, the Martin Luther King Center, and started working with the center. And I had 2 big advantages. First was the Ethiopian Jews that we brought to Israel. Martin Luther King people were very, very interested, opened the center, and we brought a huge exhibit of photos of Mivtza Shlomo, of us bringing the Ethiopians to the United States. The second was my South African background. They knew that I was assigned in the late 80s with a mission to build the contacts to Mandela and his people in South Africa. So I had a certain advantage and built a very nice relationship with them. It was not easy to reach Coretta Scott King, the widow of Martin Luther King, because she was not living in Atlanta. But I asked to meet her. Family members ran the center, including one of the sons, and they promised me when Coretta will be in Atlanta, we'll invite you. And it happened, and we had a first meeting, which was not a very pleasant meeting. She was critical of what Israel is doing to the Palestinians. And it looked as if she went through the motion because the people of the center asked her. And then, January 92 was the Martin Luther King Day in Atlanta. Every year we were in the Ibn Ezra Church, where the grandfather was the pastor, and then the father, and then Martin Luther King himself. This was the central celebration of the Martin Luther King Day. And Winnie Mandela came from South Africa. And I told you I had a South African advantage, and Winnie Mandela knew about me, knew that I was building the contacts between the ANC and Israel. And after the ceremony in the Ibn Ezra Church, Coretta Scott King and Winnie Mandela led a march into the center of Atlanta. They invited me to join. I was one of the few whites marching with them when Winnie Mandela is raising her hands, shouting, Amandla, Amandla. I had my daughter, less than 9 years old, with me, Daphna. Some of you know her today. She's a lot on Channel 2. And it was a very, very moving event. And then, elections in Israel, I think it was June 92, and I was asked to move to South Africa to be the ambassador. The Martin Luther King people had a small ceremony for me, and one of the sons told me, my mother wants to meet you. And just before leaving to South Africa, I met Coretta again. And this time she said, I have a very special request for you. Request from Coretta Scott King. She said, about 15 years ago, we established a Martin Luther King Center in South Africa. It started in a very promising way, but it is kind of fading away now. It doesn't have the finance needed. And if you can meet the heads of the centers in South Africa and help raise funds with the rich Jewish people in South Africa, I said, of course, I'll do my best. And it really happened. It really happened. I came, the center was almost dormant. I found some donors, and it was my contribution to the Martin Luther King legacy. But one thing was very interesting in Atlanta. The closer I got over the years to the Martin Luther King family, every Jewish person I knew in Atlanta came and explained to me how he personally was marching with Martin Luther King, how he donated money, and how he was a civil rights activist. And it was a pleasure to hear that everybody was fighting segregation. And then I came to South Africa. Came to South Africa. Mandela was out of jail. Thanks to really some Jewish friends he had, I met him the third way I was there. And the door was open. It was also the Rabin government. the beginning of Oslo process, and really they liked very much what we were doing. And I became, had, let's say, free access to Mandela and to his people. And suddenly what happened? Every Jewish person in South Africa came to me and explained to me how he was fighting to release Mandela and fight anti-apartheid and human rights, and the whole community was on Mandela's side. Also, pleasure to hear. It's true that there were some that were really doing it, but we knew where most of the community stood. But it was nice to hear that after Martin Luther King achieved what he achieved, and after Mandela achieved what he achieved, it was the wish of everybody to associate himself and explain to me his share in the struggle and so on. And here I come to my own dream. And we heard about the Rabbanim, Rodfei Shalom, and we see what's happening here these days. And I have my own dream that one day the Palestinians will have their leader, their Martin Luther King, their Mandela, not controversial, bringing them peace and tranquility and freedom. And all my Israeli friends will come in 5, 10, 20 years and explain to me how they fought against occupation and how they're for Palestinian rights and so on. This is my own dream. Thank you very much.
I have not much to say after the whole speeches and after Martin Luther King. I want to say, to graduate the organizers that we choose the museum to be in, because we share the vision that some changes should happen in our society, and the peace will not come by itself. We should push, we should work hard to create better society in Israel for Jewish and Palestinians, to live together, to share living in Israel, and not feeling as a minority that has been dominated by the majority for many years, for the good or for the bad. And in this museum, actually, we act with the Palestinian society and the Jewish society to bring together a betterness for living together or sharing living from the part of power. It's not from the part of weakness. And we treat all of them in this museum as an equal. If you go around the museum or practice our programs, you can see that all over the programs that we demonstrate in our museum. So we hope that more and more organizations around will be strong enough to change the reality in Israel, because it's needed. We need it desperately. And we should work together to create a new dream of those who choose to be in Israel, or to continue to live in this part of the world. Thank you very much.
Doctor of the museum, that we are all very grateful for him and for all he does to promote the city in this direction. And what can one say after that? Let's pray, say namaste. Namaste to all of you that came. And I recognize many leaders in this room. And I believe deep in my heart that what Alon, my dear friend, said, the young among you will be definitely, and I believe even us, will be a witness to, we know this, when people come to the new king and to the new, and they all participate in, people like to join victories. And how victories happen? They just happen from a dream, from the consciousness. And all in this room, we have this consciousness. It can be different in the variation, with slight, but it's the same music. It's looking in the same direction. I'm sure many of you witnessed as leaders occasions like today that really warms my heart. I remember an occasion in a refugee camp with the son of Martin Luther King. I was there also one of the initiators with Palestinian, carried by Palestinian out, grassroots organization, huge, and the same refugee camp still exists. But I know that the time is going to change, and what I don't say will happen. We'll be all witness to this.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. And what makes it happen? The hope. And I cannot after this maybe bring two little quotes. One is, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. So we have to bring this light with our smiles, belief, and real. People accept when it's real from the heart, this dream. I tell another story that when we organized a Martin Luther King Day in the States with young Jewish leaders, and someone came along that he happened to be during a vote in the States, and of course all the Afro-Americans couldn't get into vote, and so this person phoned the police station. Of course they wouldn't move, but then he heard that Martin Luther King is down. They phoned him. He came immediately. He didn't call the police. He just came in, walked in the door, and smiled to these thugs, and they felt ashamed. And from then on, the voting went on the way it should. So we are not in these days, but and yes. So another last quote, and then I throw away my papers, is we must live together as friends or perish together as fools. And we are all responsible what's not perfect and what's going to be perfect. And I remember that, I tell you this because when we were in the refugee camp, we ended by reading a poem that was written, translated to many languages. Actually, I translated it to Hebrew. You can find it in Google. In Hebrew, it's in any language. It's called "Call Me by My True Names," which demonstrates how we are all can be the same for the evil and for the good. So I'm really grateful for all of you coming. I want to mention that these young musicians that actually already starts to become famous. He is the first Ethiopian who was accepted to the unit in the army, that he only plays music. As mitztainim, as people who excel, and he's getting now to all kind of stages, one of the best stages. Okay, so thank you all very much on behalf of the Interfaith Organization and Social Work Organization. I'm not the director, I'm just the co-chairperson. We are a joint organization, but Nadim, maybe you can knows more about the organization than I know. And so thank you all very much. And let's take from here these energies and inspiration that we all share.